Silent Night. 14 May 1984, 0100 a.m. Sandra and Reynaldo both are driving in their car in the middle of a county road. After their holidays, they heading home, very tired. Sandra asks her boyfriend, "Ray, are we there yet?" Sandra yawned, leaning her head against the cool car window. The steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic motion of the car lulled her into a drowsy state. "Almost, babe," Reynaldo replied, his eyes never leaving the road. "Just another hour or so." Sandra nodded and closed her eyes, her mind wandering to the warm bed that awaited them at home. The quiet of the night was occasionally pierced by the distant sound of a car passing by, but mostly it was just the two of them and the open road stretching ahead, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness. The farmhouses they passed grew fewer and farther between, replaced by the occasional silhouette of a tree or a rusting piece of farm machinery. Without warning, the car lurched to a halt. Sandra's eyes snapped open, and she saw the fear etched on Reynaldo's face. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with sleep and confusion. "I don't know," he murmured, his hand still gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I think we hit something." Sandra sat up and peered into the darkness, trying to discern what could have caused the abrupt stop. The headlights cast a dim glow over the desolate landscape, but there was no sign of anything in the road. The quiet was eerie, broken only by the soft ticking of the cooling engine. Reynaldo's eyes remained fixed on the rear-view mirror, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. "We need to get out of here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "But what did you see?" Sandra persisted, her heart racing. Reynaldo took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the mirror. "It was big and hairy. I thought it was a bear, but it moved too fast, and it was walking on two legs." Sandra's fear grew, her heart pounding in her chest. A bear? In the middle of the road? "I know it sounds crazy, but it's what I saw," Reynaldo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get out of here." Sandra swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising panic. "Okay, let's just get out and check the car. Maybe we can call for help from the farmhouse." They both stepped out into the cool night air, the gravel of the driveway crunching under their feet. The old farmhouse loomed in the distance, a solitary sentinel watching over the desolate field. The headlights of their car cast long shadows across the landscape, and Sandra couldn't help but feel exposed. "We can't just leave the car here," she protested, her eyes darting around nervously. "What if that thing comes back?" Reynaldo's gaze followed hers, the reality of their situation sinking in. He nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the flickering headlights. "You're right," he said, his voice strained. "But we can't stay in the car either. If we can't get it started, we need to find help." They began to walk cautiously towards the farmhouse, their eyes peeled for any sign of the creature Reynaldo had seen. The darkness was thick, the only sounds the crunch of gravel underfoot and their own nervous breathing. Sandra clutched her boyfriend's arm tightly, her heart racing in time with each step they took. "Why do we have to go there?" she whispered, her eyes darting to the looming silo. "What if it's not safe?" Reynaldo's grip tightened on her arm, urging her forward. "We have no other choice, Sandra. We can't stay out here in the open." As they approached the farmhouse, the darkness seemed to close in around them. The windows of the house were boarded up, giving it a menacing, abandoned look. Sandra's fear grew with every step. "This place is giving me the creeps," she whispered, her eyes darting to the shadows. Ronaldo nodded in agreement. "Let's just check if there's a phone or someone who can help us," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. They approached the farmhouse cautiously, the porch groaning under their weight. The door was old and looked as though it hadn't been used in years. Sandra's hand hovered over the rusty doorknob, her heart racing. "What if someone's in there?" she whispered. Ronaldo put a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. He slowly turned the knob, and the door creaked open, revealing a dusty, cobweb-covered interior. The house was a time capsule of a bygone era, with faded wallpaper peeling off the walls and a thick layer of dust covering the furniture. "Let's make this quick," he murmured, stepping inside. Sandra followed, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The floorboards groaned beneath their weight, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They found a phone in the dusty living room, the receiver coated in a fine layer of dust. Ronaldo coughed as he picked it up and held it to his ear. The line was dead, and Sandra's hope sank. "Damn it!" he swore under his breath, slamming the phone back into its cradle. "What now?" Sandra whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "We have to find another way," Ronaldo said, his voice low. "Maybe there's a working phone in the barn." They stepped out into the night again, the cold air a stark contrast to the stuffy warmth of the abandoned house. The gravel of the driveway felt less stable under their feet, as if the ground itself was shifting. Sandra looked back at the house, the darkness seeming to pulse and breathe around it. "What if it's still out there?" "We've got to move," Ronaldo urged, pulling her along towards the silhouette of the barn. "We're not safe here." Sandra nodded, her legs shaking as they stumbled through the tall grass. The moon had slipped behind a cloud, and the darkness was absolute. She stumbled over something unseen, and a hand grabbed her arm, keeping her upright. "Ray," she whispered. "What was that?" Ronaldo didn't answer, his eyes still glued to the spot where he had seen the creature. Sandra could see his chest rising and falling rapidly, and she knew he was just as scared as she was. "Come on, we need to go," she pleaded, tugging at his arm. "We can deal with the car in the morning. Let's just get out of here." Ronaldo finally tore his gaze away from the spot where the creature had vanished. He nodded, and they hurried back to the car. Sandra could feel his tension, his muscles taut as he gripped the steering wheel. He turned the key in the ignition, and the engine gave a sickly whine before falling silent. "Damn it," he cursed, hitting the steering wheel. Sandra's fear grew more palpable with each failed attempt to start the car. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Ronaldo took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. "We'll walk to the farmhouse," he decided. "Maybe they have a phone we can use." Sandra didn't argue, the fear of the unknown creature outweighing her reluctance to leave the safety of the car. They set off in the direction of the house, their steps quick and quiet. The closer they got, the more she felt like they were intruding on something that didn't want to be disturbed. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle in the bushes made her jump. As they approached the house, the darkness grew thicker, as if it was alive and trying to swallow them whole. "Ronaldo, I don't like this," she whispered, her eyes searching the shadows. He nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "Neither do I," he said, his voice low. "But we don't have a choice. We need to find help." They quickened their pace, the farmhouse drawing closer. The darkness around them felt alive, the shadows stretching and twisting in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Sandra could feel eyes on her, but every time she turned to look, there was nothing there. "Ray, did you see that?" she whispered, her heart hammering in her chest. Ronaldo nodded, his eyes still glued to the spot where the creature had been. "Yeah," he murmured. "It looked like, I don't know, some kind of big animal." Sandra's eyes widened and she clutched his arm tighter. "But we have to go home," she whispered, her voice shaking. "This place is giving me the creeps." Ronaldo glanced at her, his gaze still haunted by the image of the creature. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible, "but we can't just leave the car here." They both knew that walking back to civilization was out of the question in the dead of night, especially with whatever it was that they had encountered. Sandra's mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking in the shadows around them. "What if it follows us?" she murmured, her voice cracking. "We'll keep an eye out," Ronaldo assured her, though his eyes betrayed his own fear. "We've got to get inside and find a phone, or at least figure out what's going on." They approached the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The darkness was like a blanket smothering any hint of comfort, and Sandra's imagination painted horrors in the shadows that danced at the edge of her vision. The old farmhouse loomed before them, its windows like black eyes staring into their souls. The porch creaked as they stepped onto it, the sound echoing through the night like a mournful sigh. The door was unlocked, swinging open with a groan that seemed to resonate in the pit of Sandra's stomach. The interior was shrouded in darkness, but she could make out the outline of dusty furniture and the faint scent of decay. Ronaldo fumbled for a light switch, but the room remained stubbornly dark. "We need to find a flashlight," he murmured, his voice tight. They stepped into the house, their breaths echoing in the stillness. The floorboards groaned under their weight, and the dust they stirred up hung in the air like a choking fog. The darkness was absolute, and Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they moved deeper into the house, the sound of their footsteps echoed through the empty hallways. The darkness was thick and oppressive, making it hard to breathe. Sandra's imagination conjured images of the creature waiting for them in every corner, ready to pounce. Suddenly, a piercing howl sliced through the silence, so close it seemed to be right on top of them. They both froze, their hearts racing. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, a mix of a wolf's howl and a human scream, and it sent chills down Sandra's spine. Ronaldo's grip on her hand tightened. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The howl was answered by a chorus of similar sounds from every direction, the farmhouse suddenly surrounded by an orchestra of terror. Sandra's knees went weak and she clutched at Ronaldo's arm. "We have to get out of here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of animal calls. Ronaldo nodded, his eyes wide with terror. "The car," he said, tugging her back towards the door. "We can't stay here." They stumbled through the darkness, the chorus of howls growing louder. The hair on the back of Sandra's neck stood on end. and she could feel the creature's malevolent presence closing in on them. As they reached the car, the headlights flickered to life, casting a dim glow over the surrounding area. "Get in!" Ronaldo shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. Sandra dove into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut as he sprinted around to the driver's side. Reynaldo turned the key in the ignition and the car roared to life, the headlights illuminating the night with a sudden, stark brightness. The creature's cries grew more frenzied, and Sandra could see shadows moving in the periphery of her vision, closing in around them. "We have to go now," she screamed, her voice cracking with fear. But as they peeled out of the driveway, a dark figure stepped into the path of the car. Sandra's heart stopped as she saw the creature's red eyes staring back at them, unblinking. It was massive, covered in thick, matted fur, and stood on two legs like a man. Its eyes were like pools of blood, gleaming with a hunger that was almost palpable. "Floor it, Ray!" she screamed, her nails digging into the seat. Reynaldo's eyes darted from the creature to the road ahead and then back to the creature again. It stood unmoving, its eyes locked onto theirs, as if daring them to run it down. With a roar of the engine, he stepped on the gas and the car shot forward. At the last possible second, the creature leaped aside and they sped past, the car rocking as it hit something solid and heavy in the road. "Is it following us?" Sandra's voice was a scream of terror, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The creature was indeed chasing them, its powerful legs eating up the distance with ease. The howls grew closer, and the car's headlights revealed more figures emerging from the fields, joining in the pursuit. Reynaldo's foot was heavy on the gas pedal, the engine screaming as the car hurtled down the deserted road. His knuckles were white, his eyes focused solely on the twisting tarmac ahead. The creature's eyes were like beacons of evil, burning into their backs, urging them on. "I don't know," he yelled over the roar of the engine and the symphony of howls. "But we can't stop. We have to get out of here." The creature was gaining on them, its massive form a blur in the rearview mirror. Sandra could feel its breath on the back of her neck, its malevolent intent palpable. "Faster, Ray," she screamed, her eyes wide with fear. Ronaldo pushed the car to its limits, the tires screeching as they rounded a bend. Suddenly, the creature was no longer in pursuit. The howling had stopped, leaving only the deafening silence of the night. Sandra turned to look out the back window, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Where did it go? Ronaldo's eyes remained glued to the road, his knuckles still white on the steering wheel. "I don't know," he said, his voice tight with tension. "But we can't stop now. We have to get out of here." The car's headlights swept over the landscape, the trees and fields a blur of darkness outside the car. Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still watching them, waiting for them to let their guard down. But the howling had ceased, and the only sounds were the purr of the engine and their own frantic breaths. "We're going to make it," Ronaldo murmured, his grip on the steering wheel gradually loosening. "But what about tomorrow?" Sandra whispered, her eyes still haunted by the creature's red gaze. "We'll deal with tomorrow when it comes," Ronaldo said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. "For now, we just need to get home." Sandra nodded, though the creature's chilling howls still echoed in her mind. She leaned back in the seat, her eyes squeezed shut, willing the fear to subside. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, a beacon of hope in the sea of uncertainty that lay ahead. They drove in tense silence, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. The digital clock on the dashboard ticked away the seconds, each one feeling like an eternity.